All right, we're back for the next installment of the sex therapy question and answer kind of special that we're doing, 2-day special. We just finished up with the first day, and Tori was amazing in queuing up all these different questions. Today we're on our own, and so we're like children without parents, and so
watch out.
Without supervision, there's no telling what might happen here. Tori helps kind of keep some sort of parameters around things, keep us herding cats in the right direction. Now we're on our own. I know it's a tough job, trying to keep us therapists in line. We can be a little bit problematic. So I'm excited to dive back in and continue to work through the questions that we've received. And I just want to thank everybody that submitted questions and encourage you to submit questions. Like really, we feel like this is something that God's given us to do, to really speak, God's truth around sexuality. There's so much misinformation out there, so much unhelpful material that we want to be a part of the solution as certified sex therapists, professionally trained in clinical sex therapy, as well as being trained in theology and the study of the scriptures. That myself, I'm an ordained minister, have an undergrad in biblical languages, understand the scriptures, and also understand clinical sex therapy. Tish, your background in pastoral ministry and church planning there in Kansas City, and Christian University undergrad with theological training, and at your master's level in seminary. And so, we value the scriptures and God's design for sexuality and understand the neurology, physiology, interpersonal, relational components of sexuality, and just really want for you to have information that's going to be helpful to you in navigating whatever curiosities you might have, things that you might have heard, challenges you might be facing. Just want this to be a place where you can submit your questions and get answers that you can count on to be trustworthy and to be accurate and helpful to you in your life. So that's what this time's about. We really would encourage you to go out to MyCounselor.Online /ask. There's a form there where you can anonymously submit questions to get in the queue for therapists on the team to speak to. You can also inbox the team using a private message to our Facebook page and send questions, and those will get to Tori and she'll add them to the list. You can email us. You can use the Messenger app that's on our website. You can tweet us. You can use Instagram, private messages. There's like a half a dozen different ways in which you can get your question into us. So whatever your fancy is, whatever your social media kind of jive is, you can get your question to us. We'll add it to the queue. And you can bet that you're not the only person that has the question, whatever it is. So doing so, submitting your curiosity or your question or your struggle, or asking for a friend as to about their situation, will undoubtedly not only be a blessing to you, but it'll be a help to all the others out there who maybe didn't have the guts to submit the question, but will be thankful to hear the answer. So
yes, we want it to be a safe forum.
Yeah.
Bring questions. Say, hey, is this normal? What's up with this? Like, this is what my friends are saying. Is this true? Like, just anything. Just really want there to be so much freedom and so much openness for you to bring whatever questions that you have. Being alone with sexual struggle, sexual pain, and sexual questions, like, we are on a mission. We do not want anyone to be alone.
Yes.
In their sexuality or with their sexual pain or questions. And so that's why we have 5,000 ways to bring us a question. So use any of them.
Yes. Hey, I wanted to just throw out some information from our last segment, right? We got on our soapbox a little bit and was talking about the study and research that has been done about sexual satisfaction and what that tells us. And I referenced a study, wanted to give you guys the name of that study. If you tuned in last time, you're like, what was that? You want to Google it and find out. The study was a research project out of the University of Chicago that was completed in, I think, 92 is when the results were done. It was published. The results were published in first in a 600-page tome that had all of the survey information and data and charts, and that was dense enough to, kill anybody, and was really made for academics. But it was published in a more condensed form for general consumption in a book called Sex in America in 94, and replicates some studies that were done from Stanford University and decades before. In the article that I mentioned, I think I said Rolling Stones, but it was a USA Today article that came out February 11th, 1999, that called Call It the Revenge of the Church Ladies, just summarizing some of the findings from this large-scale national study about how Americans engage sexuality and who's having the best sex out there. So very interesting findings. If you have curiosity about that out of our yesterday's post, there's the details that you can go Google it and track it down on your own. And if you didn't tune in yesterday, you missed out. I'm sure you can find the video in our feed. You should go back and watch it. It was a ton of fun together. And yeah, you can, figure out what it is we're talking about with this Sex in America study and go check it out. So, right.
What do you have for us? Some questions.
All right. First question. I know this is a lot of work here. I miss Tori already. It's a lot of work, kind of like trying to balance finding the questions and reading the questions. And I'm exhausted
already. I know, Tori, we miss you.
I need a nap. I need a nap already. All right. So the first question says, I have followed many of the suggestions that you guys have made. I'm assuming he's talking about maybe us and previous sex therapy videos that we have done or others on the team. It says that, I lost my screen. All right, I'm back. But my wife is still not interested in sex. We've been married for 13 years now, and I'm losing hope. My heart just hurts reading the question. It's such a discouraging place to be. I can just hear the pain in the question. It's going, what do I do? And that I want to be wanted by my spouse. There's this part of my life. I'm attracted to them. I enjoy connecting with them. I enjoy sharing this, and it feels painful to feel like my wife could be perfectly okay if we never had sex again, and he doesn't seem to understand or care about the pain that it causes for me to feel unwanted and to feel like this isn't part of the relationship that matters to her. Mm-hmm. So I want to maybe tee it up for you, Tish. Just coming from a woman, coming from a wife, what do you have to say to this guy that is, facing the pain of this, facing the struggle of this? And I'll let you maybe speak to him, but then also maybe if you were going to step aside and put him in another room for a moment and sit with his wife for a moment and kind of help her get into his shoes just a little bit. What is it that you would share with her?
Yeah, I mean, my heart really goes out to this individual as well, Josh. I do hear his hurt and really admire. He's obviously worked hard, been searching, been pursuing, wanting to bring help and healing to this area of his relationship. And it's super discouraging to be at a place where it's kind of like I've burned through all the resources, all the things that I've known to do, and I feel stuck. And so that is a very painful place to be. And so I think I just really feel for him and really admire his, just reaching out and the work that he has put in to learn and to grow and to invest in his sexual relationship. And so I think that shows a lot of goodness. I don't know this person personally, but I think just hearing that, I feel respect for that, and that he's engaged in growth. And so I don't know. I think I just want to speak to that. And then if I could sit down with his wife and be able to talk to his wife, there's so many different things, like so many important aspects of a conversation, when there's been a lot of hurt in the sexual relationship in a marriage or with a partner. And I think that I would be really curious about how she understands his struggle. And so how does she characterize and understand his desire for sex? How does she understand the pain that he feels? How does she understand masculine sexuality? I think I would. It's so hard in this setting, right, Josh? Because I'm like, well, I want to know her story and I want to know his story.
Right. And I'm gonna let you off the hook from speaking to that piece of it, because I think I want to speak to that piece of it, and I'll have a conversation with the husband around understanding where his wife may be coming from, and so maybe that'll kind of free you up from that piece of it, and instead maybe help her and maybe other wives that are out there kind of have some insight into kind of common maybe misunderstandings that women have about their husband's sex drive and desire, and that maybe can get in the way of their connection or cause them to have a skewed understanding of what their husband's desire for sex is about.
Yeah, thank you. I was struggling because we've sat with, my heart gets tangled up because we've sat with so many couples and we know how painful this is and how frustrating.
There's more to the story. Right?
Oh, yes.
We know that, that for the pain that the husband is feeling and feeling rejection and feeling these different pieces and wanting for closeness and intimacy, there's a counter to that. And there's a story on the wife's side also. And we don't want to neglect that reality as well and make sure that we attune ourselves to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I would just want to have a conversation with her about how good his sexual desire is for her, that God wired him and his sexuality to desire connection and bond with her through his sexuality. And that when your husband connects with you sexually, he feels such a powerful emotional and physiological connection with you, that God created it to be so powerful that he would want you more than he would want anyone else. That, as a wife, I might think, man, there's always going to be people that are more attractive than me, that are going to be more physically desirable than me. And so what makes it where my husband would want me more than someone else? It's this, that God created my husband's sexual desire in his body in a way that whenever he connects with me sexually, it actually creates a bond with me that no one else in the world can compare with. It's an emotional, spiritual, embodied bond. And so I think I would really just want to hold that up and God's design for that, of like, it is such a good, godly way that your husband is created, and that God really designed it to be to create resiliency and strength and security in your connection and in your bond with your husband. And so I think I would want to start there. I don't know if this is resonating with you, Josh, and
Totally.
you sat with
because I think a lot of times male sexuality gets a bad rap, right? Because certainly there's a lot of distorted male
Yeah.
sexuality out there, and there's a lot of abusive and destructive things that,
Yeah.
that men have perpetuated against womanhood as a whole. And so as a result, that sex can be seen through this lens as something dirty, something bad, something exploitive, something dangerous, something where uh, women are used for sex, as opposed to what you're describing, and just really the beauty of what God's designed it to be. And while that ugliness certainly does exist, that's not the design of sexuality.
Oh,
And we're looking at redeeming sexuality into God's design and having it be this beautiful, amazing thing that it's supposed to be for couples.
yes. And I would say, even if your husband's sexuality has been hijacked by brokenness, to cast a vision for its essence and what it is on a foundational level, that even if it has been hijacked and he has his own porn addiction that he's overcoming, or he has his own brokenness with its own history that has impacted his sexuality, because we know it's like you can't live in our culture without your sexuality being assaulted from a very young age. I think I would want to cast a vision for, even if that is the case, this is what God's design is. And this is worth fighting for, worth working towards, worth upholding. That even if it has been hijacked and your husband is, kind of bogged down or feeling trapped in his own brokenness in his sexuality, that there can be a freedom and a liberation of his sexuality for the purpose that God designed it to be. And at its core, it is in his body. It was hijacked. It was able to be hijacked in the way that it has been hijacked because of God's original design, even. That there is this drive to connect and to be desired and to connect through sexuality, that God, he did it on purpose.
Totally, totally. And it's a good thing that it
Yeah.
really brings bonding and closeness and connection. There's a lot of neuroscience behind that, hormones, information and study that's behind that we could get into. And we do in some other articles. And so if you're curious about that, you can go track down those other videos around those pieces. But I want to, kind of use a story or an illustration that I do sometimes in therapy, just to kind of help gals have an understanding of the significance of that sexual relationship for men, because it is incredibly significant, both for men and women, but it's integrated into male identity in a way that's a little bit different from women. That is, there's a sense of our sexual identity and our masculine identity being very integrated into each other. And that's evidenced by how we talk about our sexuality and how we experience our sexuality. Right? That women experience a separateness between their personhood and their sexuality that men don't tend to experience.
Mm-hmm.
For example, it's common for me to have gals come in, sit on my couch and say, my husband doesn't really care about me as a person. He's just interested in my vagina. It's like I'm a walking vagina to him, right? Like he doesn't even care about me as a human
Right.
being. This is never a conversation I have with men. Like I have never in 10 plus years of doing sex therapy, had a man come sit on my couch and go, Josh, I'm just a walking penis to her. Like that's sex, sex, sex. That's all she cares about. She doesn't really care about me as a man and as a person. It's only about sex.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is for a man to be accepted sexually feels like an acceptance of his whole personhood, right? That there's a sense of identity of being wanted in the fullness of my masculinity and being wanted sexually, which is why the sex industry as an illicit industry is such a powerful force in our culture, and a multi-billion-dollar industry out there, is because that sense of acceptance and affirmation that men look for through their sexuality is spoken to in a hollow and deceptive way through that industry. And what they really long for is that affirmation in a relationship with their spouse. And that's been hijacked, that very good and healthy part of how God designed them has been hijacked and monetized in an industry that's out to exploit that aspect, that is designed to be a very good motivator that drives connection in a relationship with a man and his wife, to be something that generates profit for those companies and is very destructive to marriages and family situations. So
He's
there's
fired up as a mom of a son and as a wife and as a pastor's wife and walking with couples and families who are struggling. It like makes me so mad, the exploitive nature of the porn industry on masculine sexuality. It's so cruel. It like makes me angry. And I think there's a research study, and I can't recall the name of the study at this moment. I can look it up and we can post it in the comments later. But they did a research study of what is actually like what is the aspect of the porn experience that men are after. And they hooked men up to brain scans and showed them two different, one images of like erotic, kind of feminine bodies. And then like the other aspect, they showed them images of a woman's face that had desire on it. And across the board, it was shown that men's brains lit up, not with the images of like the female body parts, which I think is very much how masculine sexuality and even hijacked masculine sexuality is characterized. But what was really giving the like hits of dopamine and reward in the brain were the images of women's faces showing desire. And I think that it's so heartbreaking, because that's really, it's like porn generates a false experience of being desired and being affirmed.
Yes, totally. That false intimacy there and that longing for acceptance, is really what is the addictive agent, or the piece that kind of draws in and makes that such a significant thing for men, for sure. And if men are honest with themselves, and I think about the even the pieces that are most erotic in terms of erotic material are just what you're describing there. The looks, the sounds, the communication of being wanted and being worthy and being found desirable. That's porn never says no. Porn is always interested. You're always attractive, desirable, and wanted. And that every fantasy involving pornography that a man would engage involves being sexually desirable and attracted to and thought of in an affirming way around their sexuality. And that's speaks to an affirmation of their sense of personhood and who it is that they are. Again, that integration between sense of personhood and sexuality. That's to be accepted sexually is to be accepted, and to be rejected sexually is to be rejected in a holistic kind of way, and is incredibly painful and difficult. I use illustration sometimes with couples. Say, if a husband kind of received an anniversary card from his wife that said, "Honey, you are so amazing as a lover. You're so attractive. You're such a stud. That if you were dead, right, and brain dead, and being kept alive on a machine, but I could still have sex with you. I'd keep your body around just so I could keep having sex with you." Right? Husband going, "This is the nicest anniversary card I've ever received." Put it on his wall at work or his locker, like, "You're never going to believe what my wife said to me. I'm such a stud." Right? Right? Right?
Yes.
Not at all what wives would be get from that same message, right? Like, "Baby, if I love you so much and you're so hot and you're so attractive, and if we could never have another conversation as long as we live, but I could keep having sex with your body, I'd be okay with that.
That didn't go over well.
No, not so well. That wouldn't, Josh like gave that anniversary card to you, and that wouldn't be like just make your heart Twitter pate in that.
So funny, Josh. I've heard you use this analogy. I wanted to like test it out because it definitely illustrates your point. But we were doing at our church, we were doing just a 1-day seminar on healthy sexuality for couples. And so I ran it past my husband. I'm just like, babe, like if I like gave you this card, like what would that be like? And he's like, that's flattering. I'm like, what? I'm like, how?
You didn't believe it. You had to try it out.
No, I shouldn't have doubted you. And I'm sharing it here because you let me share it with like over 150, however many people were at our 1-day seminar. Would be okay with, because I really was. It's just so mind blowing. But because of the integration of a man's sexuality into his personhood, it feels very like affirming and accepting to his whole person.
Yeah, totally. And just the opposite of that, for gals, right? Mm-hmm. That if you were to kind of have that message from Josh that, I don't really need the whole like conversation thing with you. Like talking with you is not my favorite thing in this relationship. In fact, if we went the rest of our married life together and we never had another meaningful conversation with each other, never, like dialogued and shared deeply from our hearts with each other, I would really be okay with that. I know it's important to you, but I just don't need that part of our relationship. Like that's not really all that important to me. And I could do without it. In fact, it's really a nuisance sometimes. I feel
like angry with him later. He's going to be like, why are you angry? I'm like, it's because Josh made me imagine you did something that really made me
mad. Right? That'd be crushing to you.
It would be crushing.
And that's exactly how husbands experience it on the other side when wives communicate unknowingly, not knowing the impact that they have on their husbands, that, you're just such a great dad and such, I just enjoy our relationship and so much. But this whole sex thing, I don't really need this part of our relationship. Yeah. It's just not that, it's not the same for me as with you. It's not as important to me. And I mean, I could totally be okay if we never had sex again. We're just, and sometimes wives unknowingly like say it like they're giving a compliment, right? They're like, I just love you that much. Like, and a man's brain is going, huh? Like, what?
It's so sad.
Huh?
And I think like when I think about wives who say that, I think that I feel really sad because they are not understanding the potential that their own sexuality has to feel connective in the same way that I've sat with husbands that are like, Tish, I don't really do emotions. I'm trying to get them to have emotional communication for the purpose of, connection and repairing.
Emotions?
They're like,
I don't want to do that. Why would I want to do that?
Anything but emotions.
Anything but emotions. Like emotional communication sounds like waterboarding. What are you saying to me?
And it's not that they don't have emotions. It's just that they have not experienced the power of their emotions to feel fulfilling and connective in the relationship.
Totally.
And I think that is the same with, and we're making generalizations. Yeah, I want to mention it could be flip-flopped. 20.
Definitely. Absolutely can. There's exceptions to it. But we're generalizing because the majority of folks that we're working with, easily 80% kind of fall in the category. Now, 2 out of 10 is still millions of people out there, millions of couples. So there's still lots and lots of couples that would be flip-flopped. But definitely 8 out of 10, it's the man who's going emotions. What? I don't want to do that. Because vulnerability has meant pain, vulnerability has meant weakness, it has not been characterized well. And so they haven't experienced what vulnerability can mean and what it can feel like and how fulfilling having that closeness and connection and safety and relationship can really be.
And that it's, I think interesting that generally speaking, that I think women maybe more intuitively can do emotions and connect through emotions, and men maybe more intuitively, especially with our culture. We won't get into that, but with how femininity and masculinity are nurtured. But anyway, don't even get me started on that. How little boys need as much touch and cuddles and affirmation as little girls do. And
you sound like you're a mom of a little boy.
I do. Can you tell that men, for different reasons, maybe more intuitively connect through sexuality, and that those can, pun intended, marry well. Thank you.
Totally. I love it.
Yes,
you're absolutely right. And I think there's a quote or a little segment in a training with Sue Johnson, who's the founder of Emotionally Focused Therapy, that when I listened to it, just resonated so much with me as a man. And she was talking about sex as a bonding activity for men, which of course we know, and all the neuroscience and endocrinology and all of it kind of supports that and says that, and all the brain studies and on and on and on, right? But thinking about the cultural aspects of what nurturing touch kind of looks like, and the reality that in a romantic and kind of sexual setting is the only culturally approved kind of way that a man can receive nurturing touch.
I hate that. It makes me, I hate that for men, because they're touch deprived, which is what's making their hunger for sexual touch so big, so loud.
Right. So much of that larger need for nurturance gets channeled into sex, when what is longed for is so much bigger than just sex. But there's this larger need for nurturance and physical touch and connection that is culturally communicated to be weak, soft. That's how women are. It's to be female and feminine instead of masculine, to need nurturance, to need tenderness, to need physical touch, and that those things aren't masculine, right? And so because we're told that, that we're not allowed to acknowledge those aspects of our personhood and those felt needs that we have, except in sexual terms. And so it's the only context where we can be caressed, that we can be touched tenderly, that we can be engaged in a nurturing sort of way and feel like it's acceptable to let that in and receive that, or to pursue that, or to ask for that, or engage that, is in the bedroom. And so all of that need gets channeled into kind of sexual expression, which also means to be rejected in that sense feels like a rejection of the only way that I have in order to have that kind of closeness and connection and care and nurturance. And so it feels like such a huge blow to have that one way I'm allowed to receive that, to be shot down and to not be valued. And it feels like such a global rejection.
Isn't that sad? And it sets up couples for this vicious cycle, that because of all that you're mentioning, especially cultural norms and how masculinity is nurtured growing up and what's acceptable to want and to need, then you get into a relationship and you feel deprived because as a man, your needs for nurturing, your needs for touch are the same as women, to be affirmed and reassured, to feel connected. And so then you come into marriage feeling deprived. And so then all of that need, the need is big, and the need is really what's just the pathway to sexuality can meet. So then they come in with this big need, and it overwhelms feminine sexual energy of like, whoa, it feels dehumanizing. It feels objectifying. It feels like it's never enough. He's never happy. He's never pleased. And then it tends to shut down feminine sexuality. And it's like, well, I don't want to touch him because every time he touches me, he wants sex.
Totally. I don't even want to smile at him, because if I smile at him, he's going to think that's an invitation to rip my clothes off and to, roll around on the floor naked together. And so I have to give him steady doses of scowls to make sure that there's no miscommunication there.
It's so sad. And that it's very likely that anytime he's like physically close to you, that comes in because he's been so deprived for so long. But then like there's not education, there's not communication. Couples go into marriage and they don't know this. And so then the deprivation continues. It is a perfect scenario.
Resentment and anger.
Yes.
And on both sides.
Yes. And then they both need coping ways to cope, ways they have to do something with their pain, and it's not safe to bring it to the relationship. And it is heartbreaking.
Yes. If you're watching this, you may notice just in the dialogue that we've seen this once or twice. It may sound like this is not the first time we've gotten this question or seen these scenarios. And I know, say questions, people are going, was there a question in there somewhere? You have to go back like a long way. We're going to get through approximately 1.5 questions because we don't have Tori here to herd us.
Apologizing in the comments. I promise
we're just putting it out there right now. Tori's not here to herd us around. And so it's hard to say rather we'll get to more than a single question or not.
See Josh and I here alone again, and you'll know it's because Tori will not allow it.
But it's so true. And it's just such a reality of unwinding that cycle is a common part of sex therapy. That when folks come in and desire disorders or low sexual desire is the presenting issue, it's super common for us to find this cycle behind that. There can be other things also. It's not the only thing. It's not 100% of the time, but I'd say very frequently when we're working with couples, low desire has this cycle kind of running behind it in a way that's created a lot of pain and disconnect for the couple and their relationship. And so, which brings me full circle back around to the conversation that I want to have with a husband in this scenario, to go, that there's a really good chance that there's elements of this dialogue that Tish and I have been having, behind what's going on for your wife in that situation. Now, I have sat with enough couples and sat with enough wives in my office, and they've come in for sex therapy or marriage counseling and are trying to work through these things to know that there are things on the other side. You say, no, I asked my wife. Maybe then, but when I hear that, when I sit down and make some space, I oftentimes hear, oh, it's a loaded question. Every time when I have answered that question or tried to answer that question, it becomes such a painful thing that I just don't even go there. And because it doesn't feel like a genuine question, it feels like when I start to share what's getting in the way, it just turns into this fight and fiasco and disaster. And I don't need that. That's not helpful. And so I'm so guarded that I'm not even willing to engage that dialogue because of how conversations go. And a lot of times it is not sex related, meaning that husband will come and go, I don't understand why there's, this sexual difficulty and disconnect. And when we get into asking the questions and kind of understanding where their wife's coming from, there's this whole disaster in the relationship in terms of a lack of safety, that of things that we can't talk about, that are creating this pain and disconnect. and the husband is all ears to talk about sex, but there's all these other unresolved conflicts and points of pain and disconnection and difficulties that they're having. And he doesn't want to talk about those pieces. He just wants to talk about sex and can't understand why a wife isn't willing to engage, or he's trying to romance her, and trying to do all the right things and try to check all the boxes in order to kind of get her interested in sex, when what her heart needs in order to be open to that is to talk about the struggle that they're having with their kiddo and their parenting disconnect, or to talk through kind of the pain felt around a financial decision that was created all sorts of stress and pain for their life that they weren't on the same page about, and now we can't talk about, or the relationship that he has with his mother, where there's a emotional intimacy there that she doesn't experience with him, and that creates a lot of pain and lack of safety kind of in the relationship. And so there's all these other conversations that are not sex related, but are totally impacting their sex life and the openness to engaging sexually. And so one of the things that we know as sex therapists is that very often things that are contributing to what's happening or not happening in the bedroom have a lot more to do with things happening outside the bedroom than what's happening inside the bedroom, and that we can't address and make progress inside the bedroom without dealing with the stuff outside the bedroom. And that's something that men have a hard time with. We struggle with, because we compartmentalize a lot more than women do typically. And so we're like, what does that have to do with? That's outside the bedroom door. Like,
yes, one thing at a time.
One thing at a time. That's insane. What does that have to do with what's going on in here? That's nonsense. Sure, we're fighting like cats and dogs. We can't speak a nice word to each other, but that's all outside that door. Why can't we be naked together inside here and put all that behind us? I'm ready to put all of that behind us. Let's just be here and be naked together, right? Sure, I'm mad at you too, but that doesn't mean that we can't get naked together.
Yes. And it's just
like,
not.
She's not a man. She's not wired like you. It's not going to work for her to kind of compartmentalize all of the relational pieces and all the life stressor pieces and all of the parenting stressor pieces and just kind of like put that in a box and ignore that and be lighthearted, free and open and sexually available.
Yes. And which is not really a healthy relationship anyways.
Oh.
Because even though it's like that man that would be in our office, it's like, I feel for him too. I'm like, there's so much more.
Mm-hmm.
You.
Totally.
That kind of your idea of intimacy, even though that's better than having all this strife and no sex. It seems like having sex in the midst of strife would at least be an improvement.
Right.
That isn't intimacy. And there's actually so much more for him as well. And that emotional connection is going to be as fulfilling to him as he knows sexual closeness and intimacy can be. That the emotional connection, the sexual connection, the spiritual connection, that, all of these pathways of connection, sexuality being one of them, like he needs all of them, but it's hard. It feels like if we just were having sex, then everything would be better. But sexuality does not solve connection problems.
It does not, believe it or not. It's true. And though, some people get kind of confused, like, what about those couples, that, they have great sexual chemistry and they're terrible for each other and they fight like cats and dogs and they can't get along at all. And they got this, great sexual chemistry. And then, how do you account for that? And that's a real thing. That's a reality that's out there, and just speaks to the power that a good sexual connection has in a relationship, and being able to help folks bond and connect. In couples who have really limited abilities to engage emotionally, typically in those situations on both sides, that neither party kind of acknowledges or has an understanding of what's missing, because there's a low emotional connectedness with themselves on both sides. And so the only place that they feel close and connected and bonded is when they're connecting physically. And so that oxytocin flood and connection and the tenderness that they share with each other when they're connecting sexually is where the one place in the world where they feel emotionally close and connected. And so they're both on this kind of yo-yo, instead of just the husband being in that place who's looking to sex to feel close and connected and bonded. When the wife has, because of her own experiences of life, have her in that same place, that's where you see those couples that are, emotionally unavailable for each other anywhere except for in the bedroom. And that's where they feel close and connected.
Which I feel like that couple, so if you think of like different pathways of connection, emotional, spiritual, physical, intellectual, it's like that couple could look at a couple who struggles sexually, but has an incredible intellectual connection. And they're like, how in the world do they make that work? Like, how can a relationship survive that there's one pathway that's really open that is enough to keep the relationship together, but it's still just a part of the whole that God would have.
Yeah, it's enough to keep them together, but still leave something lacking and unfulfilling.
Yeah.
There's still a emptiness to it, a disconnect from it that, is there because it's not whole in the way that God designed the whole package to connect in all of these different places in the relationship.
Yeah, totally. Good stuff, Josh. Is there another question?
There is, but we're like out of time.
Just getting warmed up.
I know, we're just getting warmed up here. We got through one whole question during that time. You know what that means? We're just going to have to make some more time to get back together and get through some more folks' questions and speak to their questions. But man, I just so appreciate you, Tish, and the work that you do with couples and helping them navigate through this. And really just as interim clinical director, the work that you do in overseeing all the different clinicians on our team. We've got a whole team full of folks who are speaking to sexual difficulties and struggles that couples are facing. We train folks to do so as a counseling practice to help couples and individuals navigate those challenges. So we got a team of folks that can really come alongside you if you're out there and you're listening to this and going, some of the stuff hits really close to home and resonates with some of the pain or difficulty or struggle that I'm experiencing and facing. You can connect with one of the therapists on our team, and I know that they're under the oversight of certified sex therapists who have trained and have experience in working through these things. And many of them are on the pathway to their sexual or sex therapy certification themselves. They're taking the coursework, but all of them are receiving supervision from certified folks on the team that can come alongside them and help them be helpful to you in navigating through the challenges that you're facing. So our heart is...
Thank you for having that vision. Thank you for creating and having that vision and creating a spot in the world for people to be raised up to understand the importance of sexual wholeness and healing and God's design for sexuality. And so I'm sitting here feeling really thankful for that.
Yeah, me too. It feels really good. There's such a need within the body. And so for us to be able to connect with folks online, wherever they are at in the world, and to be able to help them navigate these things feels like a really special thing that the Lord's given us to do, and feels like a real privilege to be a part of that. So if we can be a help to you, reach out, either message us or call into the office, and they'll help you get connected with somebody on the team that can be helpful to you. And meanwhile, send in your questions and we'll put them on the list, and we'll get back together again and answer another one.
We'll get to 3.
Well, that's right. We're believing that we can get there. Tori will be there. She'll help us. We'll get through something. All right.
Ladies.
Thanks, Tish. We'll see you soon.
Josh. Bye.